Hello again. In this video, we are going to celebrate, but possibly not for the reason that you suspect. And the culmination of this video will be us implementing a for loop and seeing how that works. So why is it that we're celebrating? Well, time to celebrate because we've found our first proper bug. Yay, very exciting. What is the bug, I hear you ask? Well, that's a challenge I've got for you. You might have found it already. A few of you have pointed it out already. Thanks for pointing that out. But what I'd like you to do is find an error that breaks the game. Basically, something that happens in the game where you can't progress or can't keep going any further forward. And a hint, if you'd like a hint here, is mash those buttons. So do some button mashing, which is one of the tried and tested tools of being a QA person. So there you go, there's the challenge. I'd really love for you to dive in and take that on. Give it at least a couple of minutes to see if you can find what's going on with our game. Be a little bit creative with your exploration, and I'll see you back here when you've done that. Okay, let me show you. I'll click play here, and I'll show you what's going on with the bug, and I can see what the bug will be when I click on my console here. We'll be getting an error. So on the first page here, if I click 1, not a problem, or 1 or 2, not a problem, 1 or 2 again, not a problem. What happens if I click 3? Bam, I get an index out of range exception, and the array index is out of range. So this is where our errors show up, this little stop sign here with the exclamation mark on it. This kind of error, this kind of showstopper is something that you should always jump on immediately when you see this. Don't leave it there because it will come up and bite you at some point. So what's going on here? What is the problem? Well, the problem we're seeing, if we open up our code, jump over to adventuregame.cs, we can see when we're looking for the input, we're looking for what happens if someone pushes 1, what happens if someone pushes 2, someone pushes 3, and if someone pushes 3, for example, we say, go check out the index 2 in our array. But what happens if there is no index 2? Because in the situation of, say here, I've only got one index, that's element 0, and the other ones are just empty. There's nothing going on there. So we're throwing this error where our code is saying, hey, you wanted me to do this thing, but that thing doesn't exist. So it's something that players shouldn't do. They should only push 1 because there's only one option here. But people accidentally push numbers and keys and mess around with things. So we don't want someone accidentally pushing a 2 when they should be only pushing a 1 and breaking our game. We need to prevent that and protect against that when we're creating our game. So how do we fix this? We've got the challenge. We know the challenge is stop the issue where we have a state that someone's trying to access, but that state doesn't exist. The solution is implementing a for loop. So let me tell you a little bit about loops. What is a loop? It's a repeated event that happens until a condition is met. It's very useful when counting or iterating. And one type of loop is the for loop. That's the loop that we'll be talking about in this video. There's other loops, but we're not going to cover them at the moment. We're just going to flex our muscles with this first type of loop, which is the for loop. They're all pretty similar, but with a little bit of syntactical difference and a little bit of implementation difference. But for now, we'll cover a for loop. So let's have a look at the structure of a for loop. Well, it starts off with the keyword of for, and then we have 3 areas in here. You can see the areas are separated by our semicolon. The first area is for us to initialize, declare and initialize a variable. So we can see it's an integer, type integer, called I equals 0. So in general, Ben and I don't like to use just letters like I or J or A, just individual single letters. They're not very descriptive. They don't explain what's going on when we scan through our code. But I've left it in for this example because this is a very common way that you'll see for loops written. So I wanted you to see this from a familiarity point of view. When I do my solution in this video to our bug, I'll be writing a slightly more explanatory name for our variable. Okay, the first part here is to declare or initialize, and then we say a condition. And in this situation, we're saying if I is less than something, and something we can define as a particular condition. So if I is less than something, then we move on to our iteration. And here I'm saying I plus plus. Now we haven't talked about this yet, I don't believe, but plus plus is a way of saying just add 1 to whatever the current value is. So if the current value of I is 7, then saying I plus plus will increment to 8. It will add 1 to it. We could say I minus minus, and that will decrease. It will decrement by 1. So we don't just have to be counting upwards, we can be counting downwards as well in our for loop. And then once we've written that, then we have our code block where we do something. We do these things within our code block. Very similar to when we write a method, we have the start of the method and then we have all the things in here, or if we have our if statement, and then we have all our things that we're executing within the code block. And we continue to loop through and execute our code block while our condition is true. Now let's look at our code and see what we need to do. Well, we want to change from this situation where we're saying, what did the player push? Okay, that corresponds to a particular index in the array. I'm going to give myself a little bit of space here, line 31, push that down a little bit, all the way down to here, just so you can see. Normally I wouldn't give myself this much space, but I'm doing this so you can see where I'm working, and I'm going to comment out all of this code in here. One way that we can do that is to type /*. That will comment out everything after that until we type in */. So you can see this block now is in green. That's all being commented out. It's the equivalent if I'd gone through and said ///// and so on. ////. Okay, we don't want to do that because that's too many forward slashes. I'm having trouble even saying it. Right, now under our var next states, what do we need to do? Well, this is where we're going to write our for loop. So we start off with for, we have our parentheses, and we have our 3 elements in here. The first one we are going to say, let's see, get that there. Okay, we're going to say int index. Now in my example, we'd called it just I, but this is where I'm showing you. I want to write index so I can see very clearly that this is a variable relating to my for loop as an index, and we'll initialize that at 0. Semicolon. Now what is our condition? Well, we want to say index less than, so this is saying, well, the index is less than something, and the something needs to be the number of states that we have in this particular situation. So let me just jump back over here. You can see here where I'm looking for what are the next states from my introduction state in here. We're saying, what are the next states? Well, there's only one. This element 0, remember arrays start at 0. So I've got one state, which is this outside hanger state. There's only one state. So I just want the code to know if there's only one state, then only listen or only allow the player to push key number 1. Just don't even consider key number 2 or key number 3. So we'll type next states dot length. Now that's saying what? Let me just explain this because this can get a little bit tricky. There's a few layers to go through here. Next states, well, what is that? That's coming from our variable here, which we've called next states, which we defined as state.getNextStates. The method that we're running, if we go over to state, because this is state.getNextStates just here, that is returning the next states. What are the next states? Well, the next states, we've serialized here, they will be these states over in here. Okay, so there's a few steps, but you can see that what we're doing now is we're saying, what's the length of the number of states in our array? What's the length of our array, basically? And if it's going to be 1, then we will return a length of just 1. And then we'll increment index ++ so that we can go through all of the states that we have, all of the next states. Okay, now what do we do for each time we're incrementing through our index of our array? This is where we can grab our code from down here where we've got if key down. I'll copy that and put it into my code block here. We're saying if input's gone and underlined itself for some reason there. It's quite interesting. If input.getKeyDown, key code alpha1, and we're going to put in here plus index. Why are we putting plus index? Well, each time we go through our loop, each time we loop through here, we start off with index 0, and we're saying it's key press number 1 plus 0 is going to correspond to our first state. Remember, arrays start at 0. And then next time we go through our for loop, we'll have incremented 1, so our index will be up to 1, and that will be alpha1 plus 1, that will be a key press of 2. And then if we have another state, we iterate through. If the length is 3, for example, we're going to iterate through again, and index will be up to a value of 2. 2 is still less than our length, and we will then have 1 plus 2, which is 3. Okay, so that's the explanation there. And now state equals next states. What is it that is in our array? We're saying index. Okay, hopefully that all makes sense. We're using index as what position we are in our array, and we're adding that to the key press the player needs to press, and then we're sending the player off to that particular index as the next state. Now I need to clean up my commenting out here. I'm just going to delete all of that, delete all of that. Make sure I've got the right curly brackets in here, so you can check the top and the bottom. Yes, top and bottom. Yes, top, bottom. Okay, so it looks like I've got all the right curly brackets in there that I need. Tidy it up a little bit. Save. Jump over into Unity. Click on play. See if we get any other errors in our console. No, looks pretty clean. I push 1. It's cool. If I push 3, nothing happens because it is not saying that there should be a 3 that I can push. Okay, so now when I mash the buttons, no error. Fantastic. Okay, so just to recap, we've fixed our bug by changing the way that we allow the player to give key presses. Each frame, because we're calling manage state in update, and update happens once per frame, each frame we're asking the question, did the player push key number 1? Did the player push key number 2? Did the player push key number however many options there are based upon the states that we have? And if they did push that, then the next state should be whichever index or whichever state or whichever key they pushed corresponding to alpha 1 plus index. Okay, so great work. Thanks for everyone who pointed out that we had a bug there and gave us the reason to jump back in and fix it. I look forward to hearing about more bugs that you find in the future. We always love to hear about them so we can come in and fix them and teach something new. And I'll see you in an upcoming video.